Welcome back. You're doing absolutely fantastic. I'm proud of you getting this far. You've learned a ton of things, and we've got a lot more to come. Now, this part is about the problem of ego. And this concept of ego is very hard for people to get. So I'm going to try to go as slow and make it as clear as humanly possible. So, to start with, kind of where we left off in the last section, was our responses aren't a reaction to reality. They're just pre-programmed responses to our belief systems, our BS. But it's just a story. So I want you to understand that your brain has a bunch of programs going on based on your belief systems, the things that you were programmed as a child from the imprint period, which we talked about in an earlier section. These programs are just running in the background. This is why I say most people aren't truly alive. Remember when we talked about the bumper sticker? It said the question isn't, is there life after death? The question is there life before death? If you're like a computer program and you're just running all these old programs, these old belief systems, you're just running and running and running, and you never even set these programs up, you're not living an actual life. You're just running a program. You've yet to actually live. Do you get that piece? This is like mind control. Somebody else installed these programs, you run these programs, and you have the illusion that you're actually running your life. You're living your life. You're choosing your own choices. It's just an illusion. But because it's just a story, we can deprogram ourselves and rewrite the story. Once again, I'm going to tell you, grab my REBT course, Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy. It's the science of how to deprogram your mind and reprogram your mind. It'll fix a lot of this. So this process causes a second major problem, and it's the major reason that we suffer. It's called ego. The ego is a false sense of self created by unconscious identification with the mind. Remember we said the brain has a defect in it where we do what's called metacognition. Cognition means thinking. We think about our thinking, and that creates this false sense of self. And this false self is the negative self, which does all the negative self-talk. So your brain has a small component which has taken on a life of its own. You've been falsely programmed, and now we have to figure out how to break away from this. And the way that we break away from it is A, find out the secret that I'm sharing with you right now, that you've been pre-programmed and that you have an ego, and now you know the problem and it can't hide anymore, and now we can begin to attack it and break it down. So the ego exists to give us a sense of self. That's its quote-unquote positive purpose, if it has one. You know, so you don't think you're just free floating out there in the universe. It gives you a little bit of continuity in your world, and this helps us feel stable in the world. But it also causes almost all of our pain because, again, that negative critic part of the ego, and we're going to teach you how to defeat that. So let me teach you a concept called ego fiction. To support the idea of a separate I, the ego creates a character that's forced to follow certain rules and match a certain self-image. There's an old Zen belief that simply states, every person is perfectly being exactly who they are. What does that mean? You will always run your program. You will always be perfectly who you are. Now, you'll also never waver from your self-image. It's exceedingly rare to waver from their self-image. Once you know what somebody's self-image is, you can virtually predict everything they're going to do. Why? Because the self-image is your image of yourself. You're not free to break it without what? Changing the self-image. And it's hugely, hugely resistant, like beyond any addiction, to change. Unfortunately, this is a false sense of self. You've yet to meet your real self. Ego pain is the next challenge. Whenever we feel that our I, our ego, this false part of ourself that we think is us, is being attacked, we'll defend ourselves. In the Zen philosophy, when somebody insults you, you know that they're not really insulting you. You can't be insulted. They've either said something about you and it's totally false, and therefore you don't have to take it on, or they've said something that's true, and you may need to apologize. But you did it by mistake. In the Zen philosophy, you don't do things wrong on purpose. Why would you ever do that? That'd be silly. When we're running old programs, we'll do things wrong all the time. Under the Zen philosophy, we stop doing those things. It's pretty rare. We still make mistakes, but then we just immediately apologize for them. The person continues to attack us, that's okay. We've done our best, and we move on. Again, we don't spend time on this because that would be living in the past. We let it go. Let it flow, let it go. So, we don't need to defend ourselves because this part of ourself is fake. So that makes it easy to let go because it's not us they're attacking. They're attacking the old programs. I'm hoping this is all making sense to you. So let me describe it another way. First, the story creates the ego. These programs, this old history, creates a story, and this story you think is you. Michael Jackson did a album that was called History, or as he described it, his story, his story. And that's what your past is. It's just a story that's written about you, the false you. Matter of fact, here's what the past tells you about you. It tells me an awful lot about who you were and not a thing about who you are. Remember, I am all at once that which I choose to be. If you live moment to moment, you're not trapped in your history. If you look back to your history and you believe in your history, then you'll be forced to repeat it over and over again. If you believe you can act different at any given moment, then you're freed from your history, this old story of you, and you can do whatever you want. That's when you're free. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that gets across. So, first the ego creates this old story, says it's you, and then the ego begins to write your future and tells you what to do. That's the programming. We've got to get in there as the author and change the story, change the direction, take control back from the ego, override the program and start actually being you and redeciding how you want to live. And that's what this section tells you. It says we can be the authors of our own story because it's just a story. Given the fact that this was totally made up, it was a great work of fiction, and so is the future. It's not written yet. You can decide each way that you want to be in the world. You can redecide how you want to be in the world. You can decide your direction and move forward. You just have to stop listening to your ego. In the next section, we're going to teach you how to separate from your ego, how to literally watch the thinker. That's the ego talking in your mind. Be able to target the ego and know the difference between your own true thinking and this false sense of ego. We're going to separate the two. Then this will all make more sense to you. So I'll see you in the next section.